I did not have any prior dance training to tango. I started tango in my late 20s, and it was the first time I was in a context where I was working on dance. I know I'm not the only one, and historically, thinking about who have been the people dancing tango, most people on the social dance floor are people who started tango without having any prior dance experience. And I started training very vigorously in tango, probably within a couple of years of starting it. And I developed this notion that tango is very unique, very specific, very different from other dances. And along the way, sort of hearing this criticism also of dancers who might be coming in from salsa or something, and they have salsa hips, quote unquote, and how difficult it is to break those habits. So there's this fear developed around the notion of contaminating your tango technique with other technique from other dances. That tango needs to deserves your full attention because it needs to remain pure in your body, and you shouldn't go outside of the tango technique because the technique is so specific that it might get contaminated somehow. I don't know whether this was just my own personal belief that developed through my conversations and my experiences, or if it is something that is taught to us, that maybe we are actually told this along the way. I think it's probably a combination of the two. However, in my own dance journey, it wasn't until I started studying other dance forms that I actually made progress, significant progress in tango. And it's not necessarily that I started other dances for the purpose of improving my tango, but it became obvious very quickly that the questions that I was having in tango and the technique difficulties that I was experiencing, I could not get my answers by dancing tango, but somehow by opening up to other dance forms, social dance forms, solo dancing, and dancing to different kinds of music, that actually made my tango improve in a way that I couldn't really imagine before. So even though at the start, when I was first dancing tango and studying it, I had this notion of like, oh, the better I want to be, the more I need to just focus on tango. But what I found is that actually understanding tango in the context of other dances is a lot of times what unlocks the technique and unlocks your mechanics for tango in a much more efficient way than if you were just to study tango. I put out a poll in my private Facebook group, inviting people to share what their experiences with other dance forms, and just to kind of get a sense of what do other people think about dancing other dances. And I was surprised actually by how many people said that they actively dance and study other dance forms. And there was, of course, a lot of enthusiasm on their part to say how helpful it is to dance other dance forms and how it, helps to break up the energy of tango a little bit. I know that tango energy is kind of dark and heavy. The songs are very deep and emotional. And it's pretty somber and it's pretty serious, whereas other dance forms have a very different energy. And I know that for some dancers, they're like, oh, I can't dance anything else because salsa is too happy or swing is too happy for me. Horacio Godoy even doesn't dance valse because it's too happy for him. So I understand that for some dancers, they don't like it to feel the energy of another dance form. But I kind of feel for myself the times that I get to be in a different dance space with other dancers, it's almost like a palate cleanser. It feels refreshing. And maybe that's what allows you to see tango in a different way, because for a moment you sort of shut the door on the drama and the depth and play around in the shallow waters, not in the deep end. So a lot of people are in that space. But for many people, they're like, oh no, this dance, it's so confusing already. I don't want to dance anything else. It's really, I need to focus on this dance before I move on. And for those dancers, there's that fear that bringing in other influence might confuse things, and it's already so hard. Tango is already so difficult. I think there is a fear also because tango is so different in terms of the music, for example. Tango really stands out from other dances that use percussion, and the music has a lot more groove. As a tango dancer, our technique doesn't have a lot of groove. It's very elegant. It's very graceful, but it's not very groovy. So there's a feeling of having to give up that elegance and technique to learn different kinds of movements and go into this awkward phase of learning something new. That's hard for tango dancers. It's not like that for salsa dancers, for example. As a salsa dancer, you might very easily start dancing bachata as well. And if you dance bachata, you might also dance kizomba. And if you dance kizomba, you might also be okay with Brazilian zouk. And you might even dance to the same music. So there's a lot of crossover in technique and musicality among those styles. So it's easier for those dancers to be more at home as they go from dance to dance. And with tango dancers, it's a little different for us because the music is very unique. It doesn't have the same structure and doesn't have the same emphasis. So it's understandable that for a lot of dancers, it becomes very much of a tunnel vision, like it was for me for a long time. And it feels like too much work to step outside of tango. It also feels like tango is so demanding anyway, and it requires so much of your attention to even get any good at it. And it's so different from other dances that it seems like, why would you want to even spend time in a dance form that has nothing to do with what you're studying, like tango? And it seems like it wouldn't be that helpful. That's kind of where I was at the time that I was sort of pursuing tango very seriously, and then having to realize that I was beating my head against a wall for a long time. And it was in that moment that I had the opportunity to start going more into studying other dance forms, just because tango was becoming very frustrating to me. So I think that for us tango dancers, a lot of times tango is this very sacred dance that should not be contaminated by other dances. And we see ourselves as very separate from other traditions. But the reality is that tango itself is a hybrid of sorts. When I was at this fusion event, we had 3 different nights dedicated to the history of the dance. So we had a night where we learned all about urban kiz, and a night when we learned all about Brazilian zouk and tango, of course. And what became obvious to me through listening to the origin stories of a lot of these dances and the influences that played out in the shaping of the dance, it's really obvious that tango exists on a continuum, a bigger, much broader continuum of social dance history than we think. The way tango originated, if you spend 10 minutes scratching the surface of this question of the origins of tango, you'll realize that tango might be one of the first fusion dances in history. Because it really was a fusion of lots of different elements from multiple cultures. And the dance developed over decades of people from different backgrounds coming together and dancing and experimenting with music and bringing in different influences. So, what we have today as tango, what we dance today, is a hybrid of so many influences, ranging from the African rhythms that were brought by the African slaves and the classical music brought from Europe and everything in between. So when we think about tango in the context of other dance forms, it's really useful to realize that there's a lot of crossover. There are shapes and movements and even musicality patterns that exist in other dance forms and in tango, because tango shares a lot of the roots that other dance forms share. So when you know that as a dancer, it becomes more interesting, I think, to analyze what is tango from that perspective versus seeing it from only the inside of your tunnel, where that's all you know. And, one person made an interesting point in the discussion that in Buenos Aires, a lot of the dancers, even today, dance other things as well. And in the milonga, you might have cumbia or rock and roll or salsa or bachata or, different genres. Historically as well, during the golden age, there was other genres played like foxtrot at the milonga. So it was understood that you dance other things. And there's many dancers on the circuit now who we admire and we watch as prolific tango dancers that also dance other dance forms. Some of them actually are professionals in multiple dance forms. I used to imagine tango as a language that's different from other dances. It's easy to think of it that it doesn't relate to other dances. But now I see tango more of as a dialect of the same language. Like all partner dance is one big language, and tango is just one dialect of that language. Now, one very practical way that I can describe the benefit of dancing other dance forms is the range of motion. Tango is very asymmetrical. I don't know if you've realized this, but when we're thinking about the shape of the embrace itself, it's asymmetrical. And then also the pattern of movement in terms of like how much do you go to the right versus left? How many pivots do you do to one side versus another, whether you dominate on one foot or the other. All of those things are very asymmetrical. And it causes some issues down the line that we might take for granted, like different aches and pains start happening on one side versus the other. And with other dance forms, they don't have that. The aesthetic for something like Brazilian zouk, for example, is very different. And when I, for the first time, tried to move my body in the way that, for example, Brazilian zouk or urban kiz, the way they move, what I noticed is that there was all this motion, all this space that was available to move into, but I'd never actually moved that way. So it felt very therapeutic for me as a tango dancer to actually unlock some of these ranges of motion. And in some way, I imagine it's like tango, especially when like we're thinking salon style, very elegant. It's more and more kind of approaching ballet, when you're thinking about how you elongate and how you express, you're reaching for that kind of grace and elegance that a ballet dancer would have. And dancing something like urban kiz or Brazilian zouk or blues or something that's more allows you to relax your hips, it's kind of like pulling you back down to the ground and allowing you to really feel the fullness of the range in your hips, in your knees. It softens all the joints. And what that does for me, that contrast actually illuminates what the technique needs to be for tango. So it's almost like it allows me to separate more clearly what the differences are between the dance forms. So that fear that somebody might have about like, oh, if I study other dance forms, it will contaminate my tango, or I'm not going to be able to have the correct aesthetic. Although I think that there's some possibility of that, I haven't found that for myself. And in fact, I think the ability to shift from one dance to another, to be able to shift the mechanic, is a great skill to have as a dancer, not as a tango dancer, but a dancer. And it allows you to modulate your tone better and have better balance. And not to mention that it sort of trains your nervous system differently. And again, it gives your body and your brain that moment of reset away from tango that I think is actually really good to have from time to time, because tango is not linear in a way when you're learning it. It doesn't add up that the more you study tango, the more you focus on it, the further you're going to get. A lot of times it's the opposite. It's the going somewhere and doing something completely opposite that will reset and give you some other, something else to chew on. So for some people, like myself, tango is their first dance, and you become identified as a tango dancer, not as a dancer, but a tango dancer. And it feels very threatening to think about going somewhere else, trying another dance, and having this fear like, what if that changes my tango? Or what if I'm really bad at this? Or what if somebody accuses me of not being tango enough because I'm bringing in things from other dance forms, or I have salsa hips or something? I know that there's a lot of fear around that, but if you think of tango not as a separate language, but as a dialect, and see it as on a continuum, then it makes sense that tango is supposed to change. Any dance form, any creative expression, it's supposed to change and move and breathe. So for us to push our boundaries, to allow ourselves to explore other movements, it's part of the change. It's what makes us unique as dancers. I definitely see my experience and my dedication to studying other dance forms as a unique thing that makes me different in my tango. And there are times that I'll dance with certain dancers that I can tell that they have a background in another dance form. And I appreciate those things, even though, of course, there's this question of like, what is tango and what is not tango in terms of the embrace. And sometimes you dance with certain people where they bring in too much relaxed frame and it doesn't even look like tango anymore. So yes, there's a spectrum there. But when it comes to higher levels of dancers who have danced other dance forms, I can feel that influence. I can feel that there's something different. And it's really nice to feel that. I think ultimately on the social dance floor, that's what we want. We want that novelty. We want that uniqueness. Tango is supposed to change. Your dance is supposed to change over time. And that change that you go through from the influences that you experience in your dance, I think of it as integration. Right? It's like, it's not that you are abandoning the tradition, that you're giving up tango and you're tarnishing its purity. It's more that you're actively in conversation with the tradition and you're opening yourself up to the possibility of adding something to the tradition. You'll hear me talk about this a lot, that we often think of tango as being something we have to rise up to and grow into and become. But I think of tango as more of a tool for our own evolution as artists, as dancers, as people who have an artistic vision for ourselves. I think to me, the idea of tango changing and becoming different is exciting. I know for some people it's a scary thing for some reason, but I really feel that we as dancers are supposed to change and evolve and grow. And through us, tango will also do that. And perhaps 10 years from now, tango will look different. But also, to see tango as more of a dialect of a language rather than separate allows you to actually imagine connecting with other dances in a more meaningful way. I got a chance to work a little bit with Charles, who's an urban kids dancer, when I was at this residency. And it was really interesting to explore dancing with him because urban kids and tango share a lot of vocabulary, but urban kids is organized on a grid versus tango is organized in a line of dance. So even though the leading that he was proposing and he was doing, I was very familiar and I was able to follow a lot. At the same time, it was going in completely new directions for me. So those possibilities of finding different experiences within the dance with other dancers that are not tango dancers, that's the kind of stuff that becomes more on the cutting edge for me when it comes to exploration of dance. Of course, tango itself is always going to be very deep, and you can continue nerding out on every aspect of the tradition and all of the history. But tango also is very much of an organic entity that's moving and breathing and evolving through us as dancers. So what we decide to do and how we decide to explore it has a very direct impact on what it becomes. If you want to see the little bit of the experimentation that I did with Charles, I actually posted a short snippet of our dancing on my Instagram channel, and I've linked it in the show notes. Check it out. I just realized that this is us dancing what we know. So he is dancing urban kids. He's leading me in urban kids vocabulary, and I'm just doing tango. And somehow it works. That to me is pretty special. And what about you? Do you dance other dance forms? And if so, what are those dance forms? What do you love dancing other than tango? And what kinds of insights have you gotten from those experiences? What have they revealed to you about tango? Did you learn anything that surprised you? I want to know. Pop your thoughts into the comments below, or you can send me a DM on social. You can find me at IMSO Tango, IMSO Tango. And I'm curious, do you ever catch yourself trying to look a certain way at the milonga when you're dancing? That's what we're going to be bantering about next week. So I hope you can join. Until then, ciao.